Welcome to The Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a show that is a central hub and safe space for authors to share their stories. The Bold Book with Dr. Denise begins now.
Hello, my name is Dr. Denise Nicholson, and I am the creator of this wonderful podcast that you get to be inspired by artists from all over the world. Today, I have JD Barker and Christine Daigle. Welcome.
Thank you, Denise.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. It finally is happening. We get to talk about your beautiful book. Tell me, so much has happened since, I've tried to get you on this show, but you are busy. So please tell me about your New York Times bestseller.
You want to tell them about the book, Christine?
Sure. Yeah. So the book we're talking about today is called Heavy Are the Stones, and it just released November 26th. So yesterday, as we're recording this, it is a serial killer thriller. So yeah, if that's your thing, it's kind of captures that nostalgia of all the serial killer thrillers I loved growing up, like Seven and Silence of the Lambs. If you like JD's Fourth Monkey series, probably like this book. So our main character, Jenna Campbell, is a Pittsburgh detective, and it's coming up on the 5-year anniversary of when she put away a notorious serial killer. He's a very large, very physically imposing killer. Media dubbed him the Leviticus Killer because of his style with his victims. He chose to stone them. So
Leviticus. Okay.
Leviticus. If you're familiar with that passage.
Uh-huh.
So it's coming up on the anniversary that he's been behind bars for 5 years when a stranger appears on social media calling himself Azrael, and he takes credit for a recent very high-tech killing and has threatened to unleash 10 days of horrible plague-style Old Testament Bible killings if Leviticus is not released. And he urges Jenna to confess. And she did something not quite ethical, not a little bit outside the law to put Leviticus away. And this new guy seems to know something about it, or, know maybe even what it is. And then she is faced with this old school killer, this new high-tech killer who has set up everything in advance, and what she did in order to save lives. So that's kind of the premise of the book.
Oh my goodness. This is so I love thrillers, but this seems like it is a collaboration that you guys wanted to talk about more than just stoning.
Yes.
I mean, honestly, how this came about is I've written a ton of thrillers. I write on my own quite a bit. I wrote a prequel to Dracula for Bram Stoker's family. I've written a bunch of books with James Patterson. I love working with other people. I came up in this world working as a book doctor and a ghostwriter, helping people, basically fine tune their novels and get them published. So I've been collaborating with people my entire life. And one of the things that I've learned is that, I can create a solid thriller by myself. But if I bring in somebody else that, has a knowledge base that is unfamiliar to me, it adds a completely new dynamic to the story, something that I couldn't do on my own. And Christine is a neuropsychologist. I can fake my way through that. I can do, some Google searches and read a couple of books and maybe come across with something, convincing enough on paper. But by having, authentic person with that knowledge base behind them as part of the writing team, it's you can't put a price on that. It creates a completely different book that I wouldn't be able to do by myself.
So you collaborated with Christine because of her expertise as a neuropsychologist.
Yeah, because one of the things that happens in this industry from the book side, if you're an author, my first couple of books did really well. When Fourth Monkey hit, it's still selling good today. It's been almost 10 years.
Mhm.
But when that kind of thing happens, the publishers, the industry, everybody kind of wants you to write the same book but different over and over again. They want to keep because they know how to sell it. They know how people are going to react to it. As an author, that scares me half to death. The last thing I want to do is get caught in Groundhog Day writing the same book over and over again.
Right.
But by bringing in co-authors and people that have these diverse knowledge bases that are completely different than my own, it allows me to create a book that still captures that thriller feel and the pacing and everything that readers are used to from my books, but bringing in a subject matter that I couldn't do by myself.
Yeah, this is beautiful. So Christine, as a co-author, how did your expertise, how did you bring in your storytelling and your
Yeah.
expertise into this? Because were you an author before?
Yeah. So before working with JD, I was actually writing serial fiction on the Kindle Vella platform under a pen name. Different style. So I was kind of doing quirky sci-fi adventure. I love writing. I've been writing probably almost 10 years, just for fun in my off time. And when JD said he was looking for co-authors, I kind of threw my hand up. And he said, well, have you ever written a thriller? And I'm like, no, but I will. Just give me a chance. And I think I sent JD every novel I've ever written. He was like, all right, fine. You can have a shot at it. But yeah, obviously my expertise is in here. I started my career as an intern in a downtown hospital in Detroit. And I saw some interesting stuff. They would just throw me on the psychiatry rotation to go fix whatever was broken, that day. And you meet some interesting people. And you're just like, I wonder what you do in your private life when you're not here. Cause you might be a little bit on the scary side. Yeah, I remember there was one guy in particular that had come in for something else. Like he was in as an outpatient for a car accident. And I was in a small enclosed room with him, no button. And he was talking to somebody in his head and laughing about some stuff. And I just got the creeps out. And I was like, I could see you in one of those films. So a lot of that experience comes in here. I mean, there are some fake like psychology sessions and reports, but that comes from my experience.
Awesome.
Just taking someone that you've seen is like, I wonder if you filled out this test, what that might look like. And yeah, so that definitely is embedded in the work itself, right?
I love it. Now I want to read it. So I am a nurse practitioner hospitalist.
There you go.
And I was also a teacher. Like I taught mental health to student nurses for about 5 years. So I've been in this situation. I've been in the hospital. So you are the person that I would call for the
I would get the buzzer and they just be like, come fix this. Yeah. And you get the first interview and and most of the time it would turn out to be something, whatever. Maybe there's been illicit drug use or maybe they've had a seizure and they're having after effects, or maybe it's anesthesia, or maybe they ran out of their medication. And it's usually something kind of, we can fix that, right? Yeah. But every once in a while, you get someone in that you're just like, wow, you just get chills from them and you're like, okay, we're dealing with something here. So yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. JD, you've mentioned exploring the connection between, creativity and autism in your work. Can you give me an elaboration on how this plays a role in Heavy Are the Stones or your other works?
Well, I was diagnosed with a form of autism called Asperger's when I was 22. So it's been roughly about 30 years. So I've fixed a lot of the things related to that, what could be fixed. And a lot of it has to do with, social situations and dealing with other people and things like that. But once I was diagnosed, I created a list. These are problems in my life that need to be adjusted because of this. And on the other side of that list were things that it actually gave me that I saw as benefits. My wife calls them superpowers.
Yes.
So early on in my life, I worked as a ghostwriter. And it was mainly because I could mimic the voices and styles of other authors. If you gave me a couple of pages that somebody else wrote, I can pick up on their vocabulary, their cadence, their writing style, and I can continue that, but I can write it in their voice to the point where it's indetectable. They can't tell the difference. So I was brought in to do that quite a bit, from the publishing side to help people finish novels, clean stuff up, things like that. But it also allows me to create some very intricate plot lines basically in my head. I used to write computer code, and when I write a book in today's world, I liken it to writing code, because when you write that first line of code, you have to understand how it's going to impact the very last line, and you have to understand how it's going to impact everything in between, and you have to keep track of every single one of those little pieces to make sure that it all ties together and makes sense in the end. And for better or worse, as somebody with autism, I'm able to do that with up here. I can keep it all in my head and keep it straight. I don't think I'd be able to write books, at least not on this level, without it. Again, like my wife said, it's a superpower.
Your wife is amazing. Okay. How did you create characters based on working with Christine and knowing, the outcome that you want? How did you guys create the characters for this?
Well, stories tend to come together with two different pieces. So you've got the characters, like you're talking about, and then you've got the plot, the actual scenario that you're going to drop them into. And one of the things that
Mhm.
I learned very early on is if they don't feel a connection to the characters, the book just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Characters to me, they have to be real people before I even start writing that first word. So one of the things I do is sit down and just try to figure out who these characters are, come up with their complete background. And to give you an example, in Fourth Monkey, my serial killer series, the lead detective is a guy named Sam Porter. I could take Sam and I can drop him at the entrance to Disney World, and I can tell you what ride he's going to go on first, what he's going to eat for lunch. I can tell you how he's going to spend his day. None of this stuff would ever make it into a book, but it's because I know him as well as I know my best friend or somebody else in my life. So with a book like this, with Christine, we sat down and we came up with our plot. We knew that the story was going to be about this, but then we came up with our people, and we basically created well-rounded people. We created every aspect of their life, figured out who they were. And once you know that, you can take them and you can drop them into the scenario, and you can, in my mind, I basically watch these stories play out, almost like watching a movie, because people react in a certain way, and, we just document it. So that's, me and Christine basically followed that same process.
Wow, I think this is going to do amazing. So the premise of Heavy Are the Stones is gripping, guys. 10 plagues, 10 days, 10 deaths. What inspired this concept? And how did you keep the tension high?
That came from Christine.
Yeah. So, JD's like pitched me a couple of ideas, and this one is the one he liked best. And I guess it comes partly from my job, right? And partly from, I grew up a preacher's kid. So you can say whatever you want about me. I grew up in a very religious household.
Hence Leviticus.
Hence 10 plagues. Hence, it kind of looks a bit at religion and the different ways people practice and use it, and ways that they might use it for good, and ways that they might justify it to do things that are not so good. And growing up in the church and just seeing how people talk about their religion and their justifications for things was always very, very interesting for me. So I was very fascinated with that. And of course, I have a significant amount of religious knowledge from my father, probably more than any human would want growing up in a religious household. So that was just kind of a natural plot for me. I'm like, I can do this. This will be no problem. And, I love movies like Seven growing up, which also was kind of religious in nature loosely. And I'm like, I would just love to pay a bit of homage to that, but just really fresh twist it with high-tech killers. Really put a spin on that and what that might look like now in the modern age of video streaming and video game players online with their YouTube channels and all of that kind of stuff, social media. Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that too.
Yeah.
Wow. It's wonderful to have so much support when you're writing, like experience that I meant, because you have your father's work, you have your interests as, growing up in the church. But tell me a little bit more, first you and then JD, about your life, Christine. What's your story? And do you have any interesting thing that made you just want to write this book?
Oh, this one, I pitched a couple of them, and this one kind of scared me because I'm like, this is going to be hard, and I don't know. Like, I'm going to have to up everything. Everything is going to have to be more spectacular, more tense, higher stakes than the last thing. And it kind of scared me a little bit. And someone has always said you should write the thing that scares you. And I think that's really good advice. And it did scare me. I spent a year scared that this wasn't going to work, or 9 months, whatever it was, writing this book. I like a challenge. So this was a challenge. Yeah.
Now, JD, tell me a little bit. Yeah.
For me, it was literally those same reasons. Christine pitched a number of different stories that she wanted to write, and the first two, three, five, or whatever were very similar to things that she had already written. And I knew that in order to get the best work out of her, I needed to take her out of her comfort zone. I needed to push her into something that she may not necessarily want to write. So what is the story you're thinking about that you haven't shared with me yet? What is the one that's
Yes.
kind of off over here you're considering? But you don't necessarily feel that you want to or could. And that I work with a lot of co-authors at this point. I mentored a lot of writers over the years. When you can take people out of their comfort zone, you can help shape their writing style, their skill set, and bring it to a whole other level. If you hone in on what they're comfortable with, then they kind of fall into very similar patterns. They fall into the same writing style that they've done in the past, and things don't change.
Yeah.
And part of my goal with all of this is not only to craft a good book, but it's to help take that writer to the next level on their own. Help them be able to craft write something they couldn't do by themselves.
Yeah. And JD certainly did that. So we had some chapters with one of the victims who was a 17-year-old boy. My son is almost 17. So like I took some inspiration from that. So he's fine, whatever. But every time I would write these chapters, JD would be like, go darker. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if like I can. I'm like, I am scaring myself and feeling kind of awful writing this. But JD always pushed me to like go harder, go at it more, go bigger. And yeah, like I felt like writer's boot camp, and it was a good experience.
JD, why is it so important for authors to think differently?
For me, I want to entertain the reader, and I'm a reader first and foremost. I read a ton of books. I grew up, without a TV in the house. I was reading, from a very early age. If writers don't expand their knowledge base, if they don't challenge themselves, then it's not fresh anymore. It gets repetitive, and the readers pick up on that. There's plenty of writers that kind of fall into that hole that I mentioned. They write a novel, it does really, really well, and the publisher says, okay, we want another one just like this but different. So they write it, and then they write the next one, and it's the same thing over and over again. And like you can feel that when you read the book. Like they're just literally going through the motions, they're phoning it in. And that's not like that. We can do better. And I want, I think you have to go outside your comfort zone in order to get there.
Yeah.
In Heavy Are the Stones, facing the truth can be deadlier than facing the killer. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So that's kind of a reference to what she did. So this book, we can talk about themes in writing, and I'm don't usually go into a book with a theme in mind. But when I got to the end of this draft, I kind of noticed that a theme was emerging, and it was a bit about legacy. So our main character, Jenna, is like, she's a hero. She put this guy away. She's like, people look up to her. They give her free food. Everyone's like, you're the best. And, she thrives on that, on this legacy, but she maybe didn't go quite about it the right way. And she knows that if she confesses what she's done, it could destroy her reputation, her career, everything she's worked for. So that's kind of what it's about. And then how legacy plays out with these different killers too. They want legacy as well.
Yeah.
So it was kind of an exploration of that. So she has to face what she did, and doing the right thing is going to put her life in danger. So that's kind of what that tagline or logline is about. Yeah.
So Jenna Campbell is the protagonist, guys.
Yes.
And you have to get the book to read it and understand the layers. But Jenna Campbell is forced to confront a dark secret from her past.
Yeah.
How did you approach this, crafting the layers of emotional charge character?
I think it comes back to them being real people again.
Yeah.
Like a lot of early writers, they make the mistake of painting their characters very black or white. You've got the good guys and you've got the bad guys. But if you look at people in real life, everybody falls somewhere in that gray area in between.
Yeah.
And you need, in order to create a well-rounded character, you have to show that. So even with the bad guys in a book like this, they have some redeeming qualities to them, and you have to bring that out. And I think that allows the readers to resonate with them. They feel like they relate a little bit more with each of those people. I mean, Jenna did something very bad in order to put away somebody who was worse. But she's got to come to grips with that, and she's got to decide whether that decision was right or wrong, and whether keeping it hidden was right or wrong. And ultimately we see how that plays out.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you made a really great point. We all have these complex layers. We would like to think we're all good, or some people are just all bad. But the truth is, we're all complex, and we have, multiple things going on at the same time. But the most important thing is, how do you feel you are coming across on a daily basis? Do you like yourself? Right. And I think she had to grapple with that also, Jenna.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, Christine, your work involves brain-computer interferences. And
yes.
Tell me about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Brain signals.
Yeah, so I don't know how much that came into this work, but maybe something JD and I are going to write in the future. But yeah, so I do some work in brain-computer interface. Basically what that is it's a headset that you wear on your head. So the ones that I work, there are like direct implants, but those aren't the ones that I work with. So it's basically like an EEG. If you think about what an EEG is, it reads brain waves. Mm-hmm. So you put it on your head, it touches your head in 16 points, and it picks up your brain activity. So the way that we're using it right now is with children with neuromotor disorders. So children who are primarily nonverbal, so they don't speak, and they don't have very little purposeful movement. So they're not really able to interact in an autonomous way with their environment. And so we train them to use these headsets with different commands. So, for example, one of the students that I'm working with right now has 2 commands. So this is a child who has no language, very little, like she's confined to her wheelchair, can't operate her wheelchair because she doesn't have the motor movements, who now can interact with her environment, right? So she can make choices. She can tell you what snack she wants to eat. She can turn a toy on. She can use a pitching machine to play with her friends. So it's, increasing things like autonomy, social interaction. It's very early stages right now. So the way that it works, it basically picks up waves in your motor premotor strip. So it's like a motor command. So you can activate something on or off, and you can have different choices of what you're activating on or off. But I'm expecting very soon we are going to be having communication algorithms, which will be kind of a game changer. So yeah, I do research in that for sure.
Your work is probably going to make it into another, set of series. So I'm looking forward to that. JD.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. JD, you have been really bold in taking, your work into the next level by collaborating with experts like Christine. How do you think this approach is changing the publishing industry?
I mean, years back, I used to interview celebrities. That's how I kind of got into the writing world. And one of the very first celebrities that I talked to was Madonna. And it was back in the day when she was touring for Vogue. And we talked about what she does to promote albums. And at the time, she would create a list of what she sees everybody else doing to promote an album. And once she was done with that list, she would create a brand new list of things that nobody's doing. And that's basically what she would do to promote hers. And she did that for every record. And if you take that into today's world, Taylor Swift basically does the same thing. And I think Madonna called it zigging instead of zagging. So I've always kind of kept that close to heart. When I look at the publishing industry, I look at what everybody else is doing, and I try to find a way to do something different to stand out. Last year there were over 2 million books published over the course of the year. I may have 1, or I may have, well, in this case, 4 or 5, because I've been ramping it up. But it's a very small number, so you have to find some way to rise above all these other books that are coming out. So I'm always looking for something different, something new, that nobody has tried yet. A lot of this comes from working with James Patterson too, because the guy originally came out in the marketing world. He was in marketing for years in New York before he started writing books. He wrote the Toys R Us theme song to really put it back in the day. But when you talk to him, like we've got a book coming out in March called The Writer, and he comes up with brand new ideas still today to promote books. And he's always looking for something different. So I tend to follow that model. The guy's onto something.
Guys, I'm loving this conversation because you are so transparent about how much work you need to put in or how different you need to be as an author promoting your work. And I noticed that a lot of these new authors, they're afraid to promote their work. And here we have J.D. Barker. He's the New York Times and international best-selling author of numerous novels, and he's got to put in some work and creativity in promoting his work. So guys, you got to think about how you can, be more creative and put more time and research into promoting your work. It's your responsibility, especially if you sat there and was that creative and you wrote your story and you wrote your message and you filled it with hope and you filled it with inspiration or you filled it with drama or 10 plagues and 10 deaths in 10 days. You want more readers to connect with that. So I think I really appreciate you guys sharing how you've done some research and been creative with promoting your work.
I think a lot of writers, they become writers because they're introverted, right? They like to be alone at a desk doing nothing but, talking to themselves or stay in their own head.
Yes.
So it's counterintuitive if you think about it, because you have to basically get out there to promote that book and do the exact opposite of that. You have to be ready to get in front of a lot of people and make some noise. But yeah, I think in order for a writer in today's world to succeed, you have to do that. You have to, you have to gravitate towards both of those worlds. On TV, they presented, writers as, these people that basically lock themselves in a cabin, they write their book, they mail the pages off to their agent, and then they're done with it until it's time to write the next one. It's always been that way in movies and television, but in reality, the real life is nothing like that.
Oh, thank you. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's a whole sermon. Okay. Thank you. So JD, you are a best-selling author. Your books are known for the meticulous and intricate plots, fast-paced. Can you share with the listeners how you go from the writing process, which is just, taking the idea into the concept and finishing it and creating this beautiful manuscript that is for the past 10 years has been doing so well and continues. You just wrote another book that I'm sure is going to do as well. Tell us a little bit about how you go from concept to finished manuscript.
Ooh, well, it's about 200 words at a time.
That's simple, yes.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back, like the book you mentioned, The Fourth Monkey, that was my first big thriller that sold and is still selling good today. I was working a corporate job when I wrote that. I was working 60 to 80 hours a week. I was a chief compliance officer at a brokerage firm. I hated the job, but I would take every opportunity I could to crank out those 200 words a day.
Yeah.
And if you can do 200 words a day, that's a novel in a year. I learned a couple of tips and tricks that I've kind of taught over the years that helped me get through that. So whenever I write, I listen to a thunderstorm soundtrack, basically white noise on noise canceling headphones. So whenever I put those on and I hear that sound, my brain automatically goes into writer mode. It knows what we're doing at that particular time.
Yes.
I try to write from the same place every day for the same reason. It's all a very Pavlov's dog kind of thing. If I sit down at my same desk every single day, I know when I sit down, that's what I'm there to do. And one of the other things that I learned over time is a lot of author friends of mine, they would sit down to write and they would have these marathon days. They'd get 5,000-6,000 words, which is a lot. But by the end of this, they're exhausted. They're staring at their screen. They're not sure what to write next. They've kind of put it all out on the paper. And then the next day they sit down to continue and they've got nothing. They stare at a blank screen for hours, trying to figure out how to pick it back up. So one of the things that I learned a long time ago is rather than to write, like like at that level, I do 2,000 to 3,000 words, which is very manageable. And I stop literally in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a paragraph, but I know exactly what's coming next. And what happens is that takes that anxiety off of you as an author. You already know what comes next, so you don't have to worry about it. And my brain continues to work that story subconsciously. It just keeps working on those various pieces. So when I sit down the next day to write again, I know exactly where I'm going. So I hit the ground running and just keep going and going and going. I think you have to do little things like that in order to be sustainable in this business, to keep doing it year after year.
You know what? I want to kiss you right now. You know why? I've been telling my clients for years, this is the best format. This is the best way to do it. You're better than me. You're a little kinder than me, because I ask them to write about 500 words each day, but just to stop at that 500 word. And you know the story. You are so excited about starting it tomorrow because you're stopping the writing process, but that just stimulates the thinking process and the creative process.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that, because I'm going to tell everybody to listen to this podcast.
Yeah.
To get your creative process and juices going.
Yeah. I think burnout is a real thing. Like, I did the Pitch Wars competition in 2019, is where you get an industry mentor and they help you with the novel. So I basically rewrote a 90,000 word novel in 3 months. And I was so burned out after, I couldn't write for another 3 months. I was just like, because it was just too many hours. My creative brain was dead and depleted.
Yeah.
So yeah, I am on the JD plan of, little bits a day. So yeah, it's good.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah.
Revisiting the past, just going back to the book, I realized that Jenna, she plays a very important character and she has a great message. How can we take, what lesson can we take from not just the book, but from Jenna?
I guess sometimes you do the right things for the wrong reasons and the wrong things for the right reasons, and you just have to be able to live with that.
Be able to live with yourself. With
You're
your
going to be able to
decisions.
live with yourself, and whether or not you have to come clean about it. So
Thank you guys so much for being a part of today. I'm going to ask you some more questions. One of the things that I like to do on this podcast is to ask 3 questions to each. So now I have 2 of you. So I'm going to go alternate, okay? Or should I go, you do your 3 and then he does his 3? What you
either
think?
way.
Well, let's mix it up. Let's
mix
alternate.
Let's mix it up, right? So one of the first things I have to ask is, what is a bold promise that you would like to make to the listeners?
About the book or in general?
Oh, in general.
Oh, in general. Well, I think for me, and I think this was important to me in this book when I was thinking about writing a serial killer thriller, is that there's no violence towards a woman on the page. That was really important for me in writing this book. I don't enjoy that when I'm reading that and there's like a brutal killing of a woman at the beginning to kick off some story. So there is no killing of women on the page. There's one woman that gets kind of some aftermath incidentally, but it's not the focus of the story. Yeah. So when I sent that out, that was my goal for this was, to have a woman in the lead and to not have the deaths of women be driving this story.
Thank you very much for that bold promise that you will not have any of that in your future books.
Thank you.
And JD, what's one bold promise that you can share with the audience?
I mean, one of the things that I do with all my books is I think I paint a particular picture. You think you know everybody that you're dealing with on the page, and then I completely flip it on its head. And I think in a lot of the books that I've written, the stories that I've told, the people that you think are bad may not necessarily be the bad guys when you finish that book. And same thing with the good guys. And I tend to approach life that same way. When I meet somebody, it's not necessarily always about that first impression. I think a lot of people think it is. But it's, I think the impression that I get out of somebody, it's more of a cumulative thing, over time.
Yes. Yeah, I appreciate that. What's a bold statement that you can share with the audience that will cause a paradigm shift? Christine, you go first.
Well, I think for writing in general is that you can write just to entertain people. You don't have to say something with your work.
I try to follow that. I mean, a lot of people have called what I write literary popcorn because that's kind of my goal. Like I always tell people I don't want to teach some moral lesson. I don't want to preach at anybody. I just want to people to open the book up and enjoy themselves. Just find some entertainment for a couple of hours. But for whatever reason, these moral messages tend to sneak into the books. One way or the other. And it's like you finish writing it, you get to that last page, and all of a sudden you realize you just preached. You just told somebody something. You just, created some kind of lesson on some level or another. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, that did happen with this book. I was like, this is just fun. And then I'm like, okay, now there are all these things about legacy and about how people use religion. And they do creep in. But yeah, I think maybe you don't have to think about theme beforehand. Maybe that's a bit of a paradigm shift.
It's important because you have their attention. You have someone's attention, and you can literally shift the world with your words. So it's important that you teach a lesson here and there. So thank you so much for putting in those paradigm shifts in the book. Number 3, what's a bold move that you'd like to make in the future? Christine, you go first, because I think I heard some bold moves from our previous conversation. So yes, please tell us.
What were those? You want to tell me?
Yes, you're talking about how your work can, the work that you do can be put into a news story.
Yeah, I would like to do that. Well, JD and I are working on something else, so I don't know if you want to talk about that, JD. At all.
Yeah, I guess we can. There's always something else. And I tend to, I feel like lightning has struck very, like I've captured lightning in a bottle a bunch of different times.
That's amazing.
There's a movie called Flatliners from the 90s, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. It had a great cast. It had Julia Roberts, Kevin Bacon, Kiefer Sutherland, Billy Baldwin. It was just an unbelievable ensemble cast, but basically at the start of their career. So at the time, very few people knew who they were. But it's a movie I've loved my entire life. And on one of my other projects, the guy who wrote that particular movie happens to be the writer on one of my other screenplays that's in the works. He recently got the rights back to the story. So we basically worked out something new. We're writing a novel right now to reboot the franchise, the film franchise. And Christine is working with me on that one. So it's called Flatliners Resurrection is the working title of the book. We're hoping that one's going to be out in the next year or so.
Yeah. There's a lot more medical expertise that I'm lending to that book in terms of brain function and that kind of stuff with near-death experiences. And it's a blast. I'm having a great time writing it. So, yeah.
You love collaborating, I guess,
I do. Yeah, it's fun. I mean, the original concept of that movie, it was a bunch of medical students that basically decide to kill each other to find out what comes up, in life after death. They want to prove that there actually is something. So they literally kill each other one at a time just to see what they can see and what they can come back with. So we're taking that entire concept to the 21st century, bringing it into a whole other level.
Yeah.
Whoo, I can't. I love that. I love the concept. Listen, I'm joining the writing team. Whatever.
Okay, come on.
Yes. Because I wouldn't even think of those concepts. Like, how do you come up with these ideas?
No, nobody knows. You can ask any writer where their ideas come from, and to me it comes from basically 2 words: what if.
Yeah.
So I was teaching a class a couple of months ago, and and I got asked the same question. Somebody was holding a bottle of water in the audience, so I told her to hold up that bottle of water. So she held it up over her head, and I said, "Okay, now what if that's the last bottle of water on the planet?" And all of a sudden everybody looks at that bottle of water, and everybody in that room wanted that bottle of water. So it's like, it can be something that simple. You add what if to any particular scenario, and you can take something as simple as water and turn it into a potential story.
Yeah. And I think it comes from, a lot influences too, reading widely, reading broadly. I grew up in a house where we had one television. Remember those days? And if I was going to watch something, it was what my dad was going to watch. And my dad watched science programs. It was like Nova and Scientific American Frontiers and Star Trek. So I think, that's what my head was filled with as a kid. So I have all these science what ifs. And then throughout my career, everything that I read about new and future research that's coming, I think fuel those what ifs and fuel that imagination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your work is so different. I mean, you are a neuropsychologist, and JD, you are an author.
I literally get paid to make stuff up.
You come from
Now-
finance though too. That was your background, right?
That was my last real job. Yeah, I was, like I mentioned, the chief compliance officer at a brokerage firm. I've got degrees in business, another one in finance, and I got halfway through a psychology degree.
Halfway through. That's very important.
Halfway through.
Okay.
Yeah. It was I love psychology. It was one of those things I just enjoyed studying. Like the human mind is just so fascinating to me. But the further along I got into that, I knew I was never going to practice. That wasn't the end goal. So I basically got to the point where I felt like I learned what I could from it, and then just pulled the plug.
Enough to infuse it into our stories. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's all over my writing.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face with working with others, especially co-authoring a book, and how do you overcome, how do you make it seamless? Their interests and your interests, and you're creating these people or characters that are so unique and different. How do you make it seamless? How do you make it come together and make one voice?
It's very similar to cooks in a kitchen.
Uh-huh.
So if you got two people in a kitchen, you're both making breakfast. If you both try to make eggs at the same time, it becomes a problem. But if one person is making bacon while the other person is making eggs, then it all works out in the end. So for me, when I work with a new co-author, I just try to find out, figure out what their strengths are. What are they really good at? And try to mesh that with what I can do. And we look for different things, different pieces of the same puzzle to get everything to fit together. I think that's key. If you've got two people trying to do the same thing, two writers trying to write the same thing over and over again, that's not going to work. You're going to butt heads. But if you can each bring something different to the table, that's where it shines.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. What do you hope readers take away from this book, From Heavy Are the Stones?
I hope they enjoy it. I hope they have fun. Maybe it makes them think a little bit about legacy, maybe about, the different ways that religion is used for good and bad. But overall, I just hope they have a blast. I hope they have a fun time. They keep turning those pages. It keeps them up at night and they can't sleep.
And they can't sleep.
Yeah.
Don't forget that part. What do you hope they take away, J.D. Barker?
That's it. Like I had mentioned, it's literary popcorn to me. I just want to entertain everybody for a few hours. Hopefully they close that cover and they maybe think about it a little bit, tell a friend, and pick up that next book.
You guys wrote a beautiful novel, and I can't wait. I just read the synopsis that was sent to me, and I'm eager to read this book. Matter of fact, I want it for Christmas.
Makes a great Christmas gift,
Yes. Guys, please go out there. Where can they get the book?
It's available in every bookstore as of Tuesday. So you can get it there. If you go to my website is jdbarker.com. I've got links to everything up on the website.
Thank you so much. Christine, you have something else to add?
No, that's it. Yeah, I agree.
So you guys were amazing. Thank you for coming and sharing and talking about your, wonderful book. Christine, guys, is a neuropsychologist, and she is renowned for her cutting edge work in brain and computer interfaces. And then she wrote, she's been practicing, she's been writing for a long time, but now she came out with the big guns. She came out with international best-selling author J.D. Barker. And if you know, he's amazing, and he is a New York Times bestseller. You can't get any more amazing than that if you're an author. Thank you guys for sharing and for writing this beautiful novel. I'm so grateful that I got the opportunity to interview you, and I'd love for you to come back as soon as you get the next book out. Okay?
Okay. Thank you, Denise.
Thanks for having us.
You are so welcome. If you are out there and you would like to write a book and you don't know where to start, send me an email, authordnicholson@gmail.com. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Bold Book of the Day with Dr. Denise Nicholson, a central hub and a safe space for authors to share their stories. Follow Dr. Denise on Facebook and Instagram at Denise Nicholson, or go to denisenicholson.com. Remember, no one can share your story better than you.